Hello, Stoned Apes and others who are curious about the healing powers of psychedelic medicines. Welcome to the Stoned Ape Reports. I'm your host, Stuart Preston. Each episode, I talk to another Stoned Ape, somebody who has experienced the transformational powers of psychedelics, or with a practitioner who works with these medicines. In this episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with Katlyn, who shares her story of a growing relationship with South American plant medicines, and a story of accidentally taking 300 hits of LSD. We talked addiction, grief, and much more. Please enjoy this episode with Katlyn. Okay, Katlyn, thank you so much for joining me here on the Stoned Ape Reports. I'm really excited. I know you and I have communicated back and forth for a while now, and you've been on some amazing experiences and journeys, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your story. So thanks for joining me here.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. So why don't you share a little bit about your background, maybe your Stoned Ape story, what led you to the medicine and what, have your experiences been like and what are the outcomes? I mean, how have these medicines, helped you in your life?
Well, to start, I've been interested in psychedelics from a very young age. Since the time I heard of what LSD or mushrooms were, I was seeking them out. I was looking for them. I was adopted when I was born. I was also deaf when I was born, so I had a whole childhood full of surgeries in and out of the hospital for pneumonia and whatnot. Just a life full of trauma. I lost my mom when I was 16, and around that time is when psychedelics came into my life. And I had no idea that there was any healing involved with them. I just knew that I felt drawn to them, and they helped me feel better. And along the lines, I kind of got involved with opiates for a while in my teenage years, kind of drowning out all of the traumas. And I was introduced to DMT in my early 20s. And, the first time that I smoked it, I decided to leave opiates behind forever.
Wow.
And it was a big struggle, but I knew it was just the beginning. That was when I realized that there is the healing capacity for psychedelics. And then I realized that I have traumas that need healed. So a couple years after that, a friend of mine, he had this vision of me. I was in my garden with my plants surrounding me and light was coming out of my forehead. And he live painted this painting at COSM, and I had no idea what the plants were. I really wanted them to be mimosa or marijuana. And it took about a year and a half. I asked him. He, for some reason, never told me. And then I had a really large experience. I had accidentally taken 300 hits of LSD.
What?
Yeah. I was at this party, and people were passing around this vial, and they were talking about how old it was, that it wouldn't do anything. And I was, I had a few drinks, and I was like, oh, let me see that. And I hadn't taken LSD in a couple years at this point. I was, in a sense, feeling like I was moving away, like growing up, in a sense, away from psychedelics. And I was in the, broken through to the fifth dimension for over 24 hours. And at that point, I felt like, my friend, he was this textile salesman in Peru, and he looked at me and he told me that I need to come home to Peru. And I had never even heard of Peru at that point in time, never thought about it. And it just, I started researching. I was going to go volunteer. I was going to do weaving work. And a few days after that, this couple from Peru came to Pittsburgh, and they had this seminar about ayahuasca. And they were starting this retreat center, just wanted to share information. And it really resonated with me in a big way. And it was Peru. So it just seemed so perfect. And it took me about a month after that to realize that the plants surrounding me in this painting were actually ayahuasca.
Wow.
So all of these signs were just pointing that I needed to go to Peru. And also during this time, it was a very traumatic year for me. I had lost 2 cats, 2 dogs, both my grandfathers, in a 6.5-year relationship. And I was depressed. It was like, I've had a hard life, but for some reason this year stood out as harder than most. And once I started really strongly feeling that call to Peru, I quit my job. I bought a plane ticket and I went and worked with the Shipibo family for a while and sold my whole life and kind of just started traveling back to and forth from Peru.
Wow. And so most, I guess younger years tried some psychedelics, and then later you had this 300 hits. Is there anything that came out of that? I mean, I know you said you're in the fifth dimension for 24 hours with the 300 hits, but I mean, I don't want to go down a trip report on, how crazy was it? But when you came out of that, what did you think?
Well, I felt relieved for the first time in months. It was a difficult time. And like, I really felt like I had cleared out some cobwebs, and it showed me like truly who I was. And I was seasoned veteran psychedelics, but this experience, it just like blew the lid off, and it showed me like how I could heal myself. I found God in a Herkimer diamond, and, I found the secret to life, which it was actually through the body of a mentally challenged person, because they're just pure happiness and pure bliss. And I knew that I was on this journey to get to the point of pure bliss, to the innocence that, people are not so lucky to just have.
Yeah. And then you got called down to Peru. You saw the seminar, connected, and went down to Peru. And you've been there a few times, right?
5 times, yeah.
Five times. And you don't go just for a 10-day ceremony. You go for extended periods of time.
Yeah, I started out going for a month, and then I'd go for 2 months, and then it was 6, and then 8. The last time was actually one of the shortest times of almost 3 months. So.
Wow. And so what are you doing for that whole time? I know that, when I talk to other people and friends that go down to the jungles for the journeys, you hear about the experience of, one night ayahuasca, night off, night ayahuasca, night off, maybe San Pedro, night off. But you're not doing that for 8 months, are you?
Not necessarily. I go through periods of time where I do that. Like if I'm facilitating, there'll be retreat after retreat for couple months, so I'm getting deep into it at that point. But mostly I'm doing isolated plant dietas, which is where you take time in isolation. You use ayahuasca to open up the dieta. You use it to get messages from the plants in the dieta and to close it. But it's really just isolating yourself with a plant to nurture your relationship with it and to have yourself healed, or just have that plant ally by your side.
And what plants are you talking about?
So the last plant that I dieted in the jungle was Niue Rao, which is the tree of life. There's Bobinsana, Ahosacha. They're master teacher plants. So they're plants that, Ahosacha, for example, it teaches through dreams. So when you're drinking this tea, it doesn't have any psychedelic effects, but every time you lay your head down, the dreams are just unreal. And in one of my dreams with Ahosacha, I asked the plant, where should I go? What should I do? And all I got was Ecuador. And, I just kind of tucked that away. I didn't really want to go to Ecuador. But 6 months later, I got a message from a friend inviting me to go work with a tribe in Ecuador, the Sequoia tribe. And these plants, they lead you in the direction you're supposed to go to. They bring you closer to yourself, and just open up healing for yourself and to be able to share with others as well.
Wow, interesting. I really hadn't heard that. When I hear dieta or dieta, to me it's always meant the preparation for an ayahuasca ceremony. And in your experience, it's different, right?
Yeah, definitely. The dieta before ayahuasca, that's more of a modern thing. It's just kind of giving you the purest vessel to go into drinking ayahuasca.
Right.
There are some things that interact, like different foods, like eating avocados or overripe bananas or red meat. And those are good to avoid just because they can interfere with the medicine itself. And in a way, the dieta is similar because with this dieta, you don't eat salt, you don't eat sugar, you don't eat meat. You're pretty much eating rice, potatoes, sometimes fish. It has to be fish without teeth. You're trying to strip away everything, like anything that would bring any type of pleasure into your life, you get rid of, just so you can focus on the plant. And in a way, it's similar with the ayahuasca pre-dieta, just to have a pure vessel to have the medicine work through you.
Okay. And in your times here, I mean, I know you mentioned some pretty big things. I mean, being born deaf, which I find fascinating, and the horrors of all the surgeries, and then losing your mom at what an age to lose your mother. You know, the trauma with that. Is there anything you can share about how the plant medicines have helped you with that trauma, helped you uncover the trauma, helped you understand it? You know, anything, you know, any anecdotal story you feel like sharing about medicines and working through that trauma?
Yeah, it's more than anything, it's about bringing these traumas to light, just seeing them for what they are and kind of working through that process. You know, like when I was younger, I was an emotional mess. Like I didn't know what was going on, and the psychedelics, they kind of put it right there in front of you to see. And it's a pretty uncomfortable process for most of it, but once you see things, it's easier to release them and to, you know, have friends to talk through, and, you know, therapists, whatever. And yeah,
it kind of points it out and says, here's what you've got to work on.
Definitely.
Kind of shines the light on that.
Absolutely. And there's not one experience in particular that really stands out to me. It's all of them combined. It's just me going on my journey. Like, you know, I was told in a ceremony one time that I was meant to carry plants, like back and forth between Peru and the United States. And that was terrifying to me. I, you know, was thinking in my mind, was it ayahuasca? Until a year later, I'm packing my suitcase full of medicinal plants, like anti-cancer plants, you know, plants for inflammation and what have you. Yeah. And, you know, I'm being healed by these plants, and now I'm being called to share them with other people to heal. And for me, that is huge medicine. That's
huge.
Yeah.
Wow, what an honor, I'll say to that. That's really incredible.
Thank you.
What I hear from a lot of people, and they tell their stories, is that, you know, they'll go through a ceremony or an individual personal journey or a series of ceremonies like an ayahuasca type of thing. And they learn some lessons, and then they have to work on integrating those lessons, you know, and just like you would with psychotherapy, right? You have an epiphany, and you can't just say, oh, I'm fixed. You got to work on it. With what you're talking about, the medicines as part of your life and all these long-term accesses, how does integration work with the way that you are experiencing plant medicines?
Well, for me, it's just about reaching out to my community. And, you know, when I came back from Ecuador almost 2 years ago now, I had the grounding project of starting the Psychedelic Club of Pittsburgh. That was my integration, setting up integration circles for people, just bringing the community together so we can all feel heard and seen, and integrate all of our experiences.
Nice. So you build a community, and then everybody can work on their integration together.
Absolutely. And, you know, I just, it's not something I wanted to go through alone. I felt like I needed a community as much as the community needed one as well.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And then you've done a lot of big help then creating that group and the groups within that group for everybody to get help with.
I'm doing my best.
Awesome. And I guess the fact that you're talking to me and that you started this group and you started some other things, you know, as I know, you're pretty open about your work with the medicines. Have you dealt with any stigma, any pushback, you know, from family, from friends, you know, coworkers, or anybody that's kind of looked cross-eyed at you and said, oh, you shouldn't be doing that? Or, you know, have you dealt with any of the stigma that might come along with psychedelics?
Surprisingly not. I thought that I would with my family, but they have seen the transformation that's happened with me from psychedelics, and they're happy.
Yeah.
My work is also very supportive of the work I do. You know, I had to take time off for the conference last year and different community events. And, the fact that it's moving forward with medicine, that MAPS is doing such great work with the, FDA trials with MDMA, that I feel like it's becoming more socially acceptable. There was a period in my life, though, before I started traveling to Peru, is when I kept really quiet about everything. I didn't really mention to people that I would do psychedelics. It was just, my partner and I, my friends and I, and it was a totally separate life until the big shift started to happen. And I realized how much I've been transformed and that people needed to hear about this.
Yeah. And then when you started sharing it, you noticed that there wasn't a whole lot of pushback because they saw the differences.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a real key.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say is important for somebody to have a good experience with the medicines? What things do you see that are important? I mean, you've talked about specific to ayahuasca, the dieta and the preparation leading up to that. I think a lot of us, that's our first experience with really preparing for a journey is going through the ayahuasca preparation. But in general, outside of a 300 hit thing of acid, in general, what would you say is important for somebody to have a good experience with psychedelics?
I think it's just about being open to whatever comes up, whether it be pleasant or unpleasant, knowing that you're going to get to the other side and, be a new person, see things in a new way, and you're not alone through that process.
How do you stay open? It can be a scary experience, right? I mean, especially when the medicine starts to take effect and one can feel it, and it's kind of like the roller coaster taking off, and it's like, well, here we go. How do you have any recommendations for people to kind of keep their mind and their heart open to the experience as opposed to shutting it down, from fear or any other thing that would interfere?
I mean, that it definitely takes its time, and it's about being gentle with yourself through that fear, and just remembering that staying open and trusting this process. Trust is the biggest thing throughout all of this, and it gets easier in time, and that's why it's a good thing to kind of stick with it and know that if this is a path you're feeling called to healing, that it will work out for the best, that you have curanderos, you have facilitators, you have a wide range of community around you to support you through it. During ceremony, something that helps me through fear is mapacho, which is it's a jungle tobacco, Nicotina rustica. It's really good for clearing energies within yourself, around you, and you have the allies of the plants.
Yeah. What about intentions? I know with ayahuasca, it seems to be pretty big with going into the ceremony with an intention. What's your opinion on when somebody's going into this and having an intention?
I think it's very important. Very important to have an intention, and whether or not you see the fruits of that intention from that single ceremony, it will grow. It could take years, but the fact that it's been set, sometimes you might have to work through other things to get to that intention, but just holding it in your heart, you will get there in time.
Okay. Wow, that's beautiful. I never thought about that. I think a lot of times you think, oh, here's my intention. I want to forgive myself. Drink the cup of medicine. Why am I not fixed? I think there's like some of that immediacy in hearing that it can take a long time, and just kind of plant that intention seed and put that in there is the way to go and the way to start.
Absolutely. It's definitely about planting the seed. And, I learned that through trial and error. I went into ceremonies similarly to you, wanting to see my mother who had passed away. And that was my intention for my first handful of ceremonies. And I realized a couple years later that the intention that I was planting was really to try and heal the loss of her, to try and understand what my life is like without her, how I can carry her with me. And it's not always so cut and dry, but these intentions, they grow into, bigger needs for healing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it always seems like our intention, it's almost like we don't know our intention as well as the medicine does. It says, okay, I get it. This is what you want, but I need to show you these layers first.
Absolutely. Yeah, the medicine's very wise, wiser than we could ever imagine.
Yeah, yeah, they sure are. All right, Caitlin, what else? Is there anything I didn't ask you? What else is on your mind in terms of psychedelics that you want to get out there?
There's not too much else besides, if you are feeling the call in any kind of way, if you're feeling unsupported, that there's always community, that you're always held through the medicine, through the people that are surrounding you, and we're all here to help each other grow.
Yeah. So if you feel the call, the tug at your heart, find your community. There's
Absolutely.
people there for you. Well, that's beautiful. Well, Caitlin, thank you so much for taking your time to share your story with everybody. I'm really grateful that you took the time to do this, and what an amazing story.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful to have been here today.
That concludes this edition of the Stoned Ape Reports. Thank you for listening. Please follow us on Instagram at Stoned Ape Comedy and subscribe to our newsletter at www.stonedapecomedy.com. Again, thanks for listening, and catch you next time, Stoned Apes.